A night that started in Grand Slam fashion ended with the championship celebration being put on hold as the World Series will head back to Houston for a sixth game. This is Battery Power. Corey McCartney along with Grant McCulley. Atlanta falling 9-5 to the Astros despite an Adam Duvall slam and a Freddie Freeman home run. And Grant, you had to expect at some point in this series, the Braves would get into a game with the Houston offense was going to force them to match a big output, and this was that game.
Yeah, I think you first and foremost have to look at what Houston's offense did and say, look, they had their backs to the wall. They came out to play, and they took advantage of a Braves team that was without Charlie Morton. I don't want to just say that that's the only reason Atlanta lost, because clearly when you put up a grand slam in the first inning, you put yourself in position to win. But for Tucker Davidson, not able to be as efficient as he wanted to be, particularly in the second and then the third innings before he left. And then I think Jesse Chavez, you asked a lot out of. AJ Minter, hey, the guy's human at some point. He's not going to be able to come in and throw up nothing but zeros. That's true for any pitcher in baseball. Just some stuff that had gone right for the Braves, even a night before when they won a bullpen game, just didn't go right in the second consecutive day. So I think there's a lot of different things you can take out of it. Number one has to be the disappointment of starting out in such a fashion where you feel like you're 27 outs away from a World Series championship, and actually you get the first three, then you hit a grand slam. So, you're heading in the right direction. And unfortunately for the Braves, the rest of the night just did not unfold to the script they had. And Houston gets to take this series home and live to play another day.
Yeah, it had to be awfully deflating for all those at Truist Park. Obviously the pomp and circumstance up to $1,000 just for standing room only. So certainly had to be deflating for them. This tied for the biggest road comeback in World Series history, equaling the 1919 White Sox, of course, the notorious Black Sox team that came back to beat the Reds. A clear turning point in this game unfolded in the fifth inning. AJ Minter on the mound after coming in with 2 outs in the fourth, gives up singles to Carlos Correa and Yuli Gurriel. And after a Kyle Tucker ground out, the Astros had runners at second and third with 2 outs, Alex Bregman batting. They opted to intentionally walk him to get the bases loaded and get to Martin Maldonado, and the plan backfired. He walked on 5 pitches, and then pinch hitter Marwin Gonzalez followed with a 2-run single. Grant, this when you look back at this game, this was the moment that decided everything.
Yeah, I think it was definitely the biggest one. And when it came to putting the Astros ahead for good, yeah, it was. I also think if you go back and look at the third inning when Tucker Davidson came back out, and we can discuss that later, I think that might have also put the Braves a little bit behind the 8 ball when it came to trying to keep the game right where it was. But we'll put that aside for a moment because I know you and I didn't see it exactly the same way in that particular sequence. But the big thing is, you know what Alex Bregman is. And even if he hasn't hit in the postseason and even if he's struggling, he is Alex Bregman. And if I'm going to make somebody beat me, it's going to be Martin Maldonado. The unfortunate thing for AJ Minter was he did not execute. He walked Maldonado, and in doing that, the entire thing just came unraveled. Then the Marwin Gonzalez single drops in front of Eddie Rosario. Not a lot you can do about that. This was the game where the Astros finally got some things to go their way and had some people step up with runners in scoring position, which has been a big problem for them by and large in this series. So there were a couple of different instances where I looked at it and said, that's the inning where things started to come apart. That one is a big one. There's no two ways about that. But I also feel like we can look at the overall execution of the pitchers and when you used them and how long you used them for. It's all fair to second guess. And in hindsight, I don't know what the better answers would be, and we'll never know exactly how it could have played out. But in that particular instance, I was okay with the intentional walk. The unintentional walk was the one that really, really hurt the Braves in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, the strategy makes sense. I mean, Bregman is Bregman, and Maldonado was hitting 098 in the postseason, 167 in this World Series. But I think where I question it is that Bregman had been struggling too. The resume's there. I mean, a lot like Cody Bellinger. Think about Cody Bellinger in the NLCS, and he was having all kinds of issues, and we know what he did to Luke Jackson. But Bregman had a double in his first AB, but he was hitting 200 with a 565 OPS against lefties in this postseason. He had 2 hits and 17 plate appearances in this series going into that plate appearance. It just put Minter from my end. I thought it put Minter in a situation where he had no room for error, and being absolutely nails at every point, every turn this postseason. He finally ran into some trouble, allowing a run for the second time this postseason, and the first time they allowed multiple runs.
Yeah, he did. And look, I don't want to just throw this whole thing on AJ Minter because a lot of things went wrong in this game, but he'll tell you to a man, you got to execute in that spot. I know Maldonado crept up on the plate, and that might have gotten in AJ's head a little bit, but Maldonado is the guy that you need to win that matchup every time that you can. And that was a matchup that didn't go well for the Braves by and large in this game, as Maldonado collected 3 different runs knocked in And ultimately, as the Braves lost by more than a handful of runs, Maldonado was quite a difference maker. And that walk was just one of the many ways that he was able to extend an inning, driving a run for free, and then allow Marwin Gonzalez to do the real damage. But again, if you're asking me, who do I want to beat me in that spot? Am I going to allow Alex Bregman to hit with 2 runners in scoring position and potentially do what he did in the first inning? And hey, we already know who Alex Bregman is, even if he's been struggling. Probably not. I wouldn't be able to say that, hey, I could have been an out away and I got a guy that's not even hitting 100 in the series waiting on deck. Why would I not go after that guy? But hey, baseball is a funny game. Sometimes you feel like you've got it all figured out and the game has other ideas. The ball has other ideas. The baseball gods have other ideas. And it just was one of those nights for the Astros. And unfortunately, on the flip side of that coin, it was one of those nights for the Braves and for AJ Minter.
Yeah, October has its unlikely heroes. I mean, that was Kyle Wright for the Braves in Game 4, and it was Martin Maldonado in that role for the Astros in Game 5. You mentioned what the usage of Tucker Davidson. Certainly this was, it had to be an unexpected turn of events for him. This was the guy that had replaced Charlie Morton on this roster. Certainly he gets a lead gifted to him. What did you think then of the use of Tucker Davidson and putting him out there in that third inning?
Well, I felt like coming into the game, and I said this on Twitter, that the Braves would love to get something close to what they got out of Kyle Wright, out of Tucker Davidson. The ask, though, for me was a bit bigger based on the layoff that he had had. Kyle Wright was pitching every 5th day in Gwinnett, even if he had to take a number of weeks off getting into the World Series. He also got to get a little bit of an orientation appearance a little bit earlier in the series in Houston and wasn't coming into the situation quite as cold. Now, the flip side of this is what we talked about yesterday. How do you want to approach this? Do you start AJ Minter? Do you look at Jesse Chavez to open and then go to Tucker Davidson? Or do you just turn to a guy like Drew Smiley, who ended up pitching a whole bunch of innings late in the game, which I know was frustrating for people, but with the Braves offense not being able to score, that ultimately to me is a moot point. And I don't think that that's really, you can circle it as a big reason that they lost. It just kind of adds insult to insult, really. And really insult to injury, because Charlie Morton getting hurt is why we're having this entire conversation. So the choices for Brian Snitker here, I'm not sure there was a great one. You could start AJ Minter and have a lot of faith in that. I know I certainly did and still do in his ability to come in and pitch big innings for the Braves, but ultimately this is one of the best offenses in baseball the Braves are dealing with. They are going to get hits. They are going to turn in great at-bats, and the Braves are not going to be able to keep them at bay, night in and night out for 27 outs. But you do have another game. I think you've got the opportunity with having Matt Zek. And I know Luke Jackson warmed up, but Will Smith also didn't throw in the game. A big inning from Chris Martin, inning plus from Chris Martin, who came in and gave you some big outs. That helps keep those big back end of the bullpen guys available for you. And now you can turn to your starting pitchers and hope that Max Fried is able to get back on the beam. And then Ian Anderson is waiting after that if it comes to it. The Braves are finally back to their starters after a couple of bullpen games where eventually you were going to feel like you had all the answers, but the questions were going to get changed. And tonight it was the Astros playing the part of Rowdy Piper.
You're still up 3-2, certainly.
Yeah.
But you think about the ability of pitching Max Fried on short rest. He's done this many times during the regular season. So I think there's going to be people who look at this game and say, okay, you had him potentially to use in this game and had an opportunity to put your foot on the Astros' throat and didn't take it. So the way things played out, I mean, we obviously manage in hindsight on this show. Do you think that they potentially should have considered using Max Fried on short rest?
I think that they probably did, but I also look at, and I know that this is something that's going to get a lot of criticism, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just trying to think along with the different ways that the Braves may have been looking at this, but you have 3 shots to win 1 game. Now, why put off to tomorrow what you can do today is my immediate answer to that. I do not disagree with that, but just because I say, hey, here's a theory or something they might be doing, doesn't mean that I'm co-signing on it, saying it's exactly what I would do, much to the chagrin of the people who were living in my mentions for most of this game. It wasn't fun to watch the way that this one was lost. It wasn't fun for the folks watching and tweeting along with it. It wasn't fun for the 26-plus guys in the Braves dugout either. But you are still in the driver's seat. Would you love to have finished it out at home, had that kind of fairy tale ending of celebrating in the Battery, the sterile shopping mall that's become famous apparently across the country? Yeah, you would have loved to have done that, but it didn't work out. But that does not mean the whole thing is over, that it's all lost. You still have 2 of your best pitchers starting. You still have the opportunity to win this series. And I think that even if Houston is bringing it home with the momentum of staving off elimination and getting to get back into an American League ballpark and have the DH back, the Braves still handled a lot of business at Truist Park by winning 2 out of 3. and putting themselves in position to win the World Series. Now they simply have to get the job done, finish the drill, and get those 27 outs that will have all of these men celebrating what would certainly be an improbable World Series title by anybody's standards. I don't care who you are, how old you are, how long you've been watching the Braves. Nobody expected this to be a possibility. So it's up to this club to continue saying, we can do this and find a way to make it happen.
Concerns with this series heading back to Houston, though, and the Astros coming alive offensively. I mean, Dusty Baker opted to shape things up with his lineup. He moved Carlos Correa to third. Yuli Gurriel hit fifth. Alex Bregman dropped to seventh. The result was 12 hits and 2 fewer runs than the Astros had scored in the previous 4 games of this series combined. In the ALCS, Houston got shut down in Game 3. Then they responded with 9 runs in each of the next 2 games. This kind of had shades of poking a sleeping bear. So is that a concern for you? What is this Houston team going to be capable of now that they've woken up offensively?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think this is anything that the Braves necessarily brought on themselves or did that caused the Astros to finally start hitting. I think it's just a matter of time. They did this against the Red Sox. They did it all year. They're not in the World Series by accident. But I think that ultimately for the Braves, offensively, they've got to find the answers too. The grand slam by Duvall was a big way to start a game. A monster go-ahead home run from Freddie Freeman was a great way to take that lead back. But then I think you just saw a lot of just non-competitive at-bats, a lot of outside of the zone swings, and even when you work to count, chasing ball 4, going after a lot of pitches, maybe being a little bit overly aggressive. I don't have any problem with the first pitch swinging, but I'm just not sure that in some cases that the plan was really fitting the situation as you got down and the game wore on. So maybe in what Dusty Baker did and shaking up his lineup a little bit is something that the Braves could benefit from as well, because I love what you got, whether it's Soler or Rosario. I don't care who's leading off. If you're playing it by the matchup, that's totally understandable. What goes beyond that, though, is you've got Freddie Freeman hitting second, which I like. Hitting third, though, Ozzie Albies has had a postseason in which his bats have simply not shown up. He's not been a factor for the Braves there, and I'm not sure that you can keep giving him that number of plate appearances. Not that you don't need him, and not that he's not going to have to show up and maybe do something for you, but you do have Eddie Rosario. If he's not leading off, why not hit him third? If you don't want to hit back-to-back lefties, why not hit Austin Riley third and hit Eddie Rosario in the cleanup spot if you want to do some righty-lefty deal and make it a little bit tougher for Dusty Baker to run his bullpen out there? There are options. I'm not sure if Brian Snitker is going to pull on all these levers. I actually don't have Commissioner Gordon's bat phone to tell him to make these changes, but these are the things I see when I watch it, and I think anybody that's watched Ozzie Albies in October realizes that he has not been the factor that he was throughout the season when he was one of the biggest offensive forces among second basemen or infielders all around baseball.
Yeah, he struck out twice, including a 7th inning AB against Ryan Stanek, in which he fanned on 3 pitches. I mean, hitting a team low 167 among the regulars in this series. After an 11-game postseason hitting streak, he's had 1 hit since Game 1 of the World Series, 5 strikeouts in his last 3 games. And I think look at Game 4 when he's facing Zach Greinke and he's going right on right. And we saw him. I mean, we've only seen him do that a couple times. I believe 6 to 9. It was 6 or 9 times in his entire career. We've seen him, kind of get away from creating those matchups that he can create being a switch hitter. It just seems like he's just searching for answers right now. And certainly the aggressiveness at the plate is not helping matters. It just seems like he's hunting. He's constantly hunting and just hunting for everything. Answers, anything he can hit. He's just in a bad way right now. And we know how key he is from, an energy standpoint and a run production standpoint. I just think you've got to the point with him where, he's hit third in all but 1 game in this postseason, and I will be stunned if he's hitting third when the series goes back to Houston.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And in fact, you hit several nails on the head. He's up there shooting at anything that moves, and that's not necessarily going to work for him. And he does look like a hitter who's just searching for something, that one-line drive or a couple of hard-hit balls that makes him feel like, okay, I've got my mojo back a little bit. He seems a bit out of sync. And when you're up there going righty-righty and you're a switch hitter, that automatically calls attention, I think, to where you might be. And it's not necessarily a bad idea because, Zach Greinke is a guy that a few years ago, that's not a thing you'd be trying against him. These days, maybe Ozzie looked at it and thought, hey, the other thing's not working. Maybe I'll just try this. But even the base hits he got in this World Series haven't gone incredibly far. I don't know that he's hit a ball out of the infield in terms of base hits in general. I don't think he has. And that's another thing to look at. He did have a handful of hits, but has it really been hard or solid contact, consistent contact? The answer to that is no, but a lot of first pitch swings, a lot of elevated pitches from the Astros pitchers. They've got a book on Ozzie Albies, and he's going to have to prove that he can either A, hit the pitches where they're putting them, or B, lay off of them and make them come to him and create a little bit of momentum for himself and get one of those good games that, as we saw for the Astros hitters, whether it's Carlos Correa or Alex Bregman or whoever it may be, you get a little bit of that confidence back at the plate. The game can start to slow down again, and you can feel like you're right back on that beam. And the Braves need Ozzie Albies to be there. I'm just not sure they can afford to have him hitting third in the funk he's in right now, with very, very limited opportunities remaining in this season to really put it over the top and win the World Series. I don't think anybody's ego or feelings should be put above the common goal of the team, and I've never felt that Ozzie Albies is one of those guys anyway. So if you got to make a change, you've got some answers there. You've got some options. You've got some guys who've been hitting. Maybe it's time to start stacking those guys up and seeing what you can do at the top of the order if you string them together.
Yeah, I'm sure a bad couple of days feels like a bad couple of days during the regular season. A bad couple of days during the postseason probably feels like a bad season or a bad couple of seasons, no doubt. And so it's back to Minute Maid Park for Game 6, and the Braves will turn to Max Fried with another chance to close this thing out. Fried had a 5.40 ERA this postseason, 7.74 in his last 3 starts, which included a career playoff high 6 earned runs in Game 2 when he allowed 7 hits over 5 innings. Expectations for Fried after some uncharacteristic outings from him since, getting the ball in the Game 2 of the NLDS against the Brewers and looking fantastic.
Well, now he's seen these guys, and hopefully that gives him a little bit more of a game plan, because it seems like a couple of innings in this postseason that Max Fried has kind of gotten jumped on, and things have happened very suddenly. He hasn't executed pitches exactly to the level that he had, because we talked about many times, even heading into the postseason, the Braves had won 10 out of 11, 11 out of 12, 12 out of 13, whatever the number was, starts. When Max Fried was on the mound, you knew the Braves had a chance to win the game, and a lot of that was because of how well he was pitching, not just the fact that the offense was bailing him out time and time again. He was one of the most valuable pitchers in the second half in terms of wins above replacement. In terms of the good old-fashioned eye test, it was all clicking for Max Fried, but it hasn't against the Dodgers, at least in that second start, and it has not against the Astros, more importantly, in the World Series as of yet. But this is an opportunity for redemption. I think Max Fried has that in him. He has that ability. He's shown it time and again. Now there's nothing to it, as they say, but to go out there and do it. And the Braves need Max Fried to deliver in a big-time way in Game 6 to put this series away.
Righties have been a problem for him this postseason, taking him deep 3 times. They're hitting .318 against him. That compared to, we look everything at Max Fried, you take it from the All-Star break on this season, because that's when he had the best ERA in baseball. But righties were hitting 176 against him since the All-Star break. So that's a gigantic jump when you're looking at what they're doing against him in this postseason. So then I also wonder, though, Grant, where are the Astros going to do? You could see Luis Garcia on short rest. Certainly they have a bulk option there, and Jake Odorizzi. We did see Dusty Baker use some of those big guns, but he didn't use Ryan Presley at all in this one. We saw Kendall Graveman. We saw Phil Maitan. So certainly he used some of his high leverage guys to get to this point, but he's still got some big weapons lying in the wait.
He does, and those extra tack-on runs, that would be the one thing I would point out that said, hey, that's why Ryan Presley didn't pitch in this game, and that does give him a couple of extra days to be gassed up and ready for Game 6 and Game 7 to perhaps be that 4 or 5 out guy that they would need in whatever situation is. If they are either sitting there within a run, up a run, in a tie game, it's going to be whoever and whatever situation they can put him into in order to win. That's what they're going to be looking to do again in Game 6. It's not a surprise for the Astros. But, yeah, they've got some options as far as how they want to start. With the off day on Monday prior to Game 6 on Tuesday, they could bring Urquidy back out, utilize him. If that's not going well, it could be a quick hook, and they could look to go to a guy like Odorizzi. They could figure out if, hey, Garcia's good enough that he can throw again, and we're not thinking about throwing him in Game 7. There may not be a Game 7. Let's go ahead and use him now in order to make a Game 7 a thing. That's kind of where the Astros are right now. That is the one thing that the Braves, I know everyone wants to see that sense of urgency and see them pull all the levers and do all the things and just get this thing over with. I think you do have to responsibly figure out a way to win those games. I know that may not be popular, and I'm not saying that's necessarily meaning that I'm going to sign off on every single decision that they've made as the ones I would make, but I'm just kind of trying to understand why they're doing it. They had 3 shots to win 1 game. One of those shots was expended in Game 5 as the Astros came out and simply outscored them and were able to take the series back to Houston. But now the Braves have their 2 best starting pitchers going out there. The Astros have some questions to answer about how they're going to cover the innings in Game 6. let alone Game 7. So the onus is really on Max Fried and the Braves to come out and play their game in 6 and in that series.
Yeah, Dusty Baker has to pull out all the stops, and he's got to be all hands on deck for games 5, 6, and potentially 7. So that's, the flip side, is that while Drew Smyly was out there, and you mentioned that, Twitter was not happy to see Drew Smyly out there. But, if you're Brian Snitker, you put him out there and see if your offense can find a way back into that game. You end up not having to use Luke Jackson, no Tyler Masick. Obviously Jackson was getting warm, but no Will Smith. So you've allowed some of your guys to have even more rest. So, I just think from, a strategy standpoint, the Braves are in a much better position here, certainly when you can consider the fact that they've got Fried, they've got Anderson on the back burner. So when you consider Game 6, Houston, hostile environment, Fried on the mound, what to use the biggest factor in this game for the Braves walking out of there and popping some champagne in Houston?
It's going to be the offense showing up and not only scoring early like they did, but also being able to score often. They can't go cold for 6 innings at a time because this Astros team, especially when they get the DH back and get back in their own ballpark and get to kind of transfer a little bit of that energy into their lineup and into their clubhouse and dugout, I think they're going to be up for it. And this is a team that's been there before. They got some experience, not just the guys that are on that team that were around for the last few times that they've won the American League and gone out to go to the World Series, win the World Series, as the case may be. And also a guy like Dusty Baker, who's got to be motivated to finally, at some point, reach up as a manager and grab that brass ring and win a World Series himself. So I'm interested to see exactly how it is that plays out. But if it's me looking at one thing the Braves can do, it's figure out a way to get the offense going. It certainly has a lot to do with Max Fried laying the foundation by giving the Braves at least a quality start, if not an outstanding start, which would go a long way. And then see what happens when you bring in your big guys in that bullpen and ask them to do what they've done so well this October and hand the ball to that group that has just put you in a position to potentially win a World Series. Let them bring it home. I think the Braves have it where they want it strategy-wise, more so than the Astros do. I agree with you, but it's difficult to close out a team like the Astros. You got to give them some credit. You can say all the things you want to about where they were 3-4 years ago and all those things, but this is the club you're facing right now, and you better figure out a way to beat them because now they're at home, and they certainly have been comfortable at Minute Maid Park in the postseason in the past.
Well, the Braves are still 1 win away, and if they're throwing a party, it'll have to be on the road in Houston. As the World Series continues, we'll have you covered right here on Battery Power. So spread the word and subscribe to the Talking Chop YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications. That way you'll get an alert each time we drop a new episode. Thanks for watching. I'm Corey McCartney. He's Grant McCauley, and we'll see you in next time, Braves Country.